Hello and welcome back to another lesson of Logos and Letters. My name is Liam and we're looking at chapter 2 today. We are looking at the first lesson that's associated with truth and falsity quite properly. In chapter 1, where we looked at homonyms, synonyms and paronyms, of course we were sort of dancing around the idea of what's true to say and what's not. But here we're going to get into it. Okay, so ton legomenon tamen kata simplokein legetai tadanu simplokeis. Tamenun kata simplokein hoyon anthropos trekai anthropos nekai tadanu simplokeis hoyon anthropos bus trekai nekai. Right, so he's saying of things that are said, there are those things which are said according to combination, and those things which are said without combination. Okay, so that's pretty plain and simple. Everybody knows that, whether unconsciously or consciously. But why is this important? Well, look at his examples. Tamenun. Therefore, there are those things according to combination, just like man runs, or man is running. The man is conquering, or man conquers. Tadanu simplokos hoyon anthropos. So, like man, cow, is running, is conquering. What's the real difference there? And why does that have anything to do with truth and falsity? Well, without combination, you're not going to have anything to do with truth or falsity. With combination, you can have something to do with that, if that's what you want to do. So, what's the real lesson to take away from that? The first lesson, and it's quite an interesting one, it's quite a useful one to remember, is that not everything that is said has something to do with truth or falsity. Another way of saying that is, not everything that is said is intended to be true or false. And I like the second way of explaining it better. Not everything that is said is intended to be true or false. Okay, so obviously if people just point at something and say the word, for example, they might be learning a second or third or fourth language and they don't really know how to combine their speech just yet, and they just point and say things. Or maybe they're a young child, an infant, learning their first language, and they don't really say too much. They just point at a car and say car. They point at their dad and say dad, that's the limit of their language, and they're saying without combination, we don't really know what's going on. Okay, what's happening there? Well, if we look at some images, we can make this more concrete. So last lesson, just a few minutes ago for me, we looked at this image. Now, let's say we're in the seats. Okay, we're somewhere around this area, we're in the seats, we're watching on. Now, if Latin was your second language, you're just learning it, you could say wir, right? Man, wir. Or you could say wiri, men, right? Now, that you're not communicating anything true or false, really. I would get what you're trying to say, right? So if you start combining a subject with what the subject is doing, now you're on the way to truth and falsity, right? So if you said, hey, look, man, I'd go, okay, yeah, sure. But if you said, hey, look, man is conquering, the man is conquering, right? Which is actually an example given here. Anthropos nikai, right? Man is conquering, overcoming. Yeah, that's true. There is a man there that is conquering. And there's also a man who is suffering. There's a man who's being defeated. There's a man who's being overcome. And that's true, and that's true at the time. Okay, let's just say that it's happening at the time. All right, and these men are condemning. All right, men and women, these people, I guess men can still apply to males and females collectively. So these people here are condemning. That's true. But if you just said people, It doesn't have anything to do with truth or falsity. All right. So all these people condemn me as well. All right. So let's imagine this guy takes his sword, his gladius, and he plunges it into the man and kills him. At the time, it's true to say man is killing, right? Man is executing. Okay, that's definitely true. And the combination of the subject, right? Gladiator, bellator, is actually gladiator would be more accurate. Is if you combine him with his action and he's doing that action at the time, that's true. All right. If we combine these subjects with the action that they're doing at the time, that's true. But not everything said has to be true or false. And there's another example of that. Is the one where someone seems to be praying. That would be a good one for us to look at. This one. All right, so prayer is a great example of where things said aren't intended to be true or false. All right, we say, forgive me, Lord, for I have sinned. That has something to do with truth. You're declaring something. But in the other parts of a prayer, if you think about it, doesn't really have much to do with truth or falsity. You'd say, Lord, bless my family. Well, that's someone can't pull you up on what you just said and say, hey, that's not true. That's ridiculous. If you say, bless my family, bring peace to the world, no one can interrupt your speech and say, hey, that prayer is not true. Only say true prayers to God. You'd raise one eyebrow and be at complete loss for how to respond to that. So prayers are a great example. Poems are another example. They're communicating something. It's not intended to be true. Although poems can definitely be very true. They're not intended to be true or false, just to communicate something that only poetry can communicate. Songs are the same. What's another example? Romance as well. The things we say in romantic relationships. Do we have a painting here that has sort of a romantic sort of look to it? Like in this one, I think it's called Godspeed, this artwork. Just tying on this like memory keepsake sort of thing. I'm sure it has a proper name. And she might say something romantic to this man. And the romantic thing isn't supposed to be true or false. Like if you said to someone in a romantic way, you are my world. Right? That's that person's not trying to say you are literally the planet that I live on. Right? That's ridiculous. You are my world is like a communication that you're all that's important to me. You're all that I need. All right? So even romantic speech has nothing to do with truth or falsity. So if this knight, if she said to him, you are my world, and then someone else overheard that and said, actually, no, this planet is your world, that person's just got it all wrong, back to front. Not everything said has something to do with truth or falsity. And that's the first lesson that we're getting here. And Aristotle himself, the philosopher, is trying to point us in the right direction really well by signifying that you need to combine a subject with an accurate description of what they are or what they're doing at the time. Okay? So here, if we were there in present time, we would say she is standing. The woman is standing. Okay? We could say the judge is sitting. All right? All this stuff said in combination is true. But if we just looked and we just said sitting, okay, there's nothing true really about that, because what do you mean sitting? What subject are you talking about? And especially this relates to chapter 1. Okay, this is where I'll finish the lesson, but it relates to chapter 1 as well, because I wish I had a painting of people looking at a painting. That would be just perfect. I don't think I get so lucky as finding that. Actually, this will do. So this soldier here is taking a quiet moment, probably in prayer to Theotokos, the god bearer, and her son, and he's having a quiet moment. So while you were waiting for him, if you were a soldier and you're waiting for your friend over there just to have a quick moment in prayer, or maybe a long moment, it's probably been a big day, and you could look at this, all right, and this is where chapter 1 comes in. You'd say, the man is praying. Okay, that's true. You're saying the subject, the man, and you're combining it with what they're actually doing at the time. And it's true. So the man is praying. This is where a homonym would come involved. The man is praying to the woman. Now, hold on. We get what you mean by saying the woman, because you're talking about Mary, all right? However, it's not actually Mary that he's praying to right now. You can't say he is standing at the feet of Mary. No, because what is the actual essence of this? If it comes down to it, how would you define the essence of this? You'd have to, like, maybe a mural or a painting. So it's not actually Mary. Now, of course, Mary can hear his prayers, but it's a much different thing if Mary herself was actually there. All right, we'd have some like vision of Fatima sort of situation here if Mary was actually there. So he's standing at the feet of a homonymous, right? I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but homonymous Mary. So that's how chapter 1 sort of steps in here, and why it's so important for the next thing. Because you try to say something true, but the homonym is actually preventing you from saying something that is true. Clear speech will get rid of that. All you need to do is say, Fred is praying at the feet of the painting of Mary, the Mary painting, okay, something like that, and then that would be true. Synonyms as well. Let's see, what would a good synonym be? All right, so you're standing in an art gallery, you're looking at this painting, you go, wow, look at those animals are leaving the ark. Well, a logician can pull you up and say, hey, well, they're not actually animals. That's just painting, all right? And that would be really annoying and frustrating. That person's hyper literal like that, but they've got a point. Okay, there are no actual animals leaving the ark. You're looking at a painting, because the definition of this is a painting. So yeah, that's how it sort of comes into play. We don't have many logical tools to play with at the moment, but hope I am showing you how clear speech is quite important. So two rules to take away here. Clear speech is always super important for not being pulled up on something that you've said as being incorrect. But also the second thing is that not everything that is said has to do with truth and falsity, and that's a good thing. That's good for us to remember. That's great for us to not be so obsessed with truth and falsity all the time, which is quite common in our day, of course. So ton legomenon tamen kata simploken legatai. Of those things that are said, there are some according to combination. Ta anu simplokes. Some things without combination. Combination of what? This is the final point before I wrap up. Combination of what? It's a combination of a subject or subjects with a description of what they are, what they're doing at the time. Right? So a description here, you could say, what's a good one? Use this one. Isaac and Abraham. So at the time, it'd be true of this angel to say Abraham is sacrificing Isaac. True. You've combined is sacrificing with the subject Isaac. And look, the philosopher's doing that here. Without combination, running, conquering. But with combination, man is running, man is conquering. Abraham is sacrificing. Without combination is just sacrificing. All right. And even with Isaac here, is being sacrificed, all right? Or calling out for help. Maybe Isaac's calling out for help. Isaac is calling out for help. That's true, okay? So yeah, we'll leave it there. I hope that was clear enough. Pretty straightforward lesson so far, but it quickly escalates in a bit of complexity. I wouldn't say difficulty, but there are some more moving parts here in the next lesson, because we're going to introduce quite a loaded and important word. Hypokaimenu, right? We're going to look at substance, the thing that underlies all other things. So yeah, if you really want some dense philosophy here and logic, you're in for a treat for the next lesson. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and if you've got any further questions, just leave them down in the comments. I'll get around to them. I'll try. I promise I will at some point. How long or short that takes, permit to heaven. But yeah, hope you've enjoyed your time. Hope you have a great day. My name is Liam, and I'll see you next time.